Before we begin talking about perspective, we're going to talk about form or three-dimensional shape, and that will lead us into perspective for the day. So this is the warm-up for the ages 7 to 9, and they'll each get a half sheet of paper like this. And first we're going to talk about what's the difference between a shape and a form, or these are flat, and how can we turn them into a three-dimensional shape. So this one is a circle. What's the difference between a circle and a sphere? Well, one's round. The way that we make a circle look round is to shade it. So just like when we did the Liberty Bell in week 2, we used shading to make that bell look a little bit more round. So I would show the students how to create that shading on one side, and all of a sudden it looks like the light's coming in from there, and we have shadow on the other side. And then they would do that on theirs as well. How do we go from a square to a cube? That one's not so easy. This is where perspective starts to come in. We start to use lines that go away from us to create the idea of things going off into space. So I'm going to take my ruler, and from each corner of my square, I go out back a little ways, and your students could follow you along with that. To create the sides of the cube, I simply connect these two lines at the top, and I connect these two lines at the side. So now we've gone from a flat shape to a three-dimensional cube by adding those lines in perspective. Just like we shaded the sphere, adding shading to our cube is going to make it a lot more three-dimensional looking. So I'm going to do some light shading at the top and some darker shading on the side. So all of a sudden we go from a cube now even to having a light source. The light's hitting the front and there's shadows on the sides. For the third shape, how do we go from a triangle to a pyramid? We want to do lines going away into space again, just like with perspective. So I'll go to the bottom and I'll go a line going into space. And now I want to connect my top to that bottom side. So I'll do it like that. So all of a sudden we have another side to our pyramid. And again, we want to talk about shading. Shading is going to create that sense of light and shadow. And this concept will connect with our Washington Monument because we're going to be seeing shapes like this and like this as we do that monument. Once you're done with the warm-up, then you'll just pass out the drawing paper to your students. And they're going to each need a ruler and a pencil, just like with the warm-up. When we do a landscape in perspective, we always want to start with the horizon line. And this is always going to be horizontal. For this drawing, I'm going to do mine in the center of the paper, but the horizon line can go anywhere on the page for when they practice this type of thing at home. I'm going to do the vanishing point in the middle. And again, vanishing points can go anywhere along our horizon line, but I'm going to do my monument and my reflecting pool right here in the center. Once they have those two items on the paper, we're going to start doing our lines going away from us in space, just like we did with our objects. I'm going to line up my ruler on the vanishing point, have it go way down to the side of my paper, and end up right about there. For the other side, I'll do the same thing, but going away from me this time, to the opposite side. And hopefully you already showed your students a picture of the Washington Monument before you started this, but it's going to be the reflecting pool that goes away from us, and then a tall Washington Monument there. So make sure you have a book or a printout of that Washington Monument so the students can see what they'll be doing. Once you have your vanishing points and your lines connecting there, we're going to start doing the Washington Monument above it. I'm going to do my vertical lines, but they're going to come down even lower than my horizon line. I'm going to bring them down right there to where my line is for the pool. I'm also going to do this over here on the other side, connecting it down below the horizon line like that. I'm going to draw a line across here, and that's going to be the top of my monument. And above the monument, there's a triangle, so I will do a dot there, and then connect that down with each side of my rectangle. Now we want to make the bottom a rectangle as well. So I'm going to connect that like that and use my eraser. Even though the vanishing point is still there in our minds, now the Washington Monument is covering it, so I get to take that away. Things are still vanishing towards the same point, but it's no longer part of our drawing. Now, just like in the warm-up, we're going to take a box or a square or a rectangle, and we're going to make it more into a cube. So how did we do that? We took and we did lines going away from us into space. So I'll do that there. And that's going to allow me to do a three-dimensional rectangle rather than a flat rectangle. And how did we take a triangle and make it into a pyramid? We added a line going away from us, which we already have, and then we connected that to the top. So all of a sudden, we went from flat shapes to a three-dimensional obelisk happening on our paper. Just like we did shading in the warm-up, we're going to do shading here. We're going to make it look like the sun is coming from the side, and this side has shadow. So I'm going to do some light shading at the top. I'm going to do some even darker shading on the side. Now this Washington Monument I did here is a little bit too thick. So in the actual drawing with my students, I would make it even thinner. It's a very tall, thin monument, so this proportion is quite a bit off. There we go. Now you can show the students how to draw trees and things like that in perspective. We know that things that are closer to us are bigger and things that are far away are smaller. So I could show the students if there was waves in the pool, the waves could be big as they're close to us with my curving lines. And as they go away from me, far away towards the monument, they would get smaller and smaller and smaller. So this is the idea of adding details, still using the idea of perspective, things getting smaller the further away they are. I could do the same thing with trees. I could add a really big tree that's close to me, but the closer I get to my horizon line, the smaller my tree will get. Like that. So again, it's adding details using the idea of perspective and things getting smaller the farther away from you. After you've showed them how to do waves or trees in perspective, they can add some of those things to their paper, or they can add clouds and birds and things like that. So you can let them kind of use their imagination to fill in the scene with things. Hopefully they're using perspective. If they choose not to, that could be fine too. It's totally up to you. And if there's time, you can hand out colored pencils and have them fill in the rest with color.